Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we'll be concluding, most probably we'll be able to conclude the discussion of the Madhyamika philosophy, the Madhyamika school of Mahayana Buddhism, that is Nagarjuna system, by today's class. So I have discussed many of the most important foundational verses of the Madhyamika Karika, called Mula Madhyama Shastram. There's a foundational work of Madhyama system of philosophy called Shunyavada. About 447 to 448 verses. In some of the larger editions, you may find 450 slokas or verses, or in Sanskrit. That is the foundational dialectical work of Shunyavada. Nagarjuna, as I mentioned earlier, wrote two more. He wrote many more books, but we are going to discuss only three books, that is Madhyamika Karika, then Vigraha Vyavartani, and the Ratnavali. So the second important book, which already discussed many of the verses, not the entire text. It is small, somewhat, compared to Ratnavali and Mula Madhyama Shastra. It is only 72 verses. There are varying editions. And Ratnavali is somewhat bigger, 500 verses. Though somewhat simple. Now, as I mentioned earlier, to go back to some of the core principles, tenets of Madhyamika system, the most important and well-known commentary on Madhyamika Karika by Chandrakirti, called Prasannapada, is an exponent of what is called the Prasangika school of Madhyamika system, which believes that Nagarjuna did not originally propose to establish any specific system of philosophy. He was trying to enter into the core principles of the opponent's view and trying to bring out or reveal the inconsistencies of the opponent's system, which is called the Prasangika method. In modern English, an approximation can be called the reductio ad absurdum. Though this term is used maybe in the context of Greek philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, it may not be as comprehensive or as extensive as Nagarjuna's Prasangika method. Ratnakirti is supposed to have done more justice to Nagarjuna's original thought system than Bhavya and others who follow different path in interpreting Madhyamika system. It's called, they believed in Swabhava, I mean something to establish, not just to refute, but something to establish. So Nagarjuna believed that he doesn't have to prove anything. He has only to disprove the opponent's view by bringing the inconsistencies. In contrast to this, Bhavya and others, they took a different perspective called the Swabhava method. They thought something has to be proved. So this idea is brought out at the very beginning of Vigraha Vyavartani. Sarvesham bhavanam sarvatra na vidyate subhavaschet tut vajanam asubhavam na nivartayadu subhavamalam. So this is a view, what we call Purvapaksha, is put forward. Yadi sarvesham bhavanam hedu pratyayeshu cha hedu pratyay samagriyam cha prithak cha yatra sarvatra subhavo na vidyate iti Kudikutva Shunyaga Sarabhava Haiti Nahi Bijehi Bhedbhude Ankura Asti Na Prithvi Aptejo Vayadina Mega Gasmin Pratesam Nyayiti Na Prateshu Samagreshu, etc. Anyway, this is already we discussed this earlier. Nagarjuna begins by projecting a Purvapaksha, an opponent's view. Maybe a view that may be raised against Nagarjuna's own system, he projects and then he refutes. Atra vayam brumaha yadi evam tavat api vajanam yadedat sunyaha sarvabhava iti tadapi shunyam. So this is the continuation of the opponent's view. If everything is shunya, then your own philosophy, your own doctrine that everything is shunya is also shunya. It means everything is real. So now Nagarjuna's point is this. This would be true if I am trying to prove something, but I am not going to prove anything because there is nothing for me to prove. Everything is shunya, so nothing to prove. So this argument of yours has no value. This is where we started, and we already explained this earlier very, very elaborately. A few more things about Vigraha Vyavartini and then Ratnavali. Now, in Vigraha Vyavartini, what he does is, it's a polemical text which is structured as a dialogue with other schools of philosophy, the opponents, with systematically refuting objections to Shunyavada through a kind of dialectical reasoning. Most importantly, by, let's say, pretend to accept the opponent's view and then look at the whole thing from the perspective of the opponent's view, and then bringing the inconsistencies, revealing the inconsistencies. Reductio ad absurdum. I mean, you reveal the absurdities, and then the whole structure gets demolished. So, this is a very interesting system. That's why he says, Atra vayam brumaha yadi evam tavapi vachanam yadi edat shunyaha sarvabhava iti tadapi shunyam kim karanam tadapi hedu nasti, etc. The beginning itself, I took this verse and of course I quoted many other verses also. This is the most archetypal example of Nagarjuna's view. So an opponent is arguing that if everything is shunya, then whatever you are teaching is also shunya. So everything is just a word without a substance. Just a word. So all these elements associated with the conditions dissociate from do not exist. So for example, when you try to put a word, the throat, lips, teeth, palate, nostrils, all these are included, which he mentions already discussed earlier. Now, he says, this view cannot stand the opponent's view. So actually I discussed this earlier, so I'm not going to discuss this again. So we already discussed many portions of Vigraha Vyavartani, so there is no time, and we want to finish the Nagarjuna system today if possible, and then take up the Yogacara system, Asanga, Vasavantu, Dingnaga and others. So it is very, very dialectical, very argumentative. You understand the seriousness of the specific structure of Vigraha Vyavartani when you compare it with Ratnavali. Ratnavali is, I mentioned, a didactic poem, poetical work, instructional. It is meant to teach somebody, to put wisdom into in the head of a king, apparently. So there is a historical background which we will discuss when we take up Ratnavali. So the focus in Vigraha Vyavartani is on the inconsistencies of the opponent's view, non-Shunyavada view, and slightly confrontational. You find Nagarjuna is in a way a forerunner to Gaudapada. Gaudapada, who wrote his work about 250 years after Nagarjuna, in the 6th century AD, Gaudapada Karika or Mandukya Karika, which we discussed very elaborately for almost 3 years with Shankaracharya's commentary. Some years ago, you can find on YouTube. So Gaudapada is supposed to have taken many ideas, especially the method of entering into the opponent's system and then bringing out, revealing all the inconsistencies and absurdities of the opponent system, and then finally disappearing from the platform, saying Ajadavada, because nothing is born. You find a kind of Ajadavada in Nagarjuna also, that we discuss later. So it is very analytical, and technically it brings up the epistemological foundations of Shunyavada, and essentially it's meant for dialecticians and philosophers and scholars, not for common people. But Ratnavali is totally different. Ratnavali, so at the very early, more or less the beginning of the structure, Nagarjuna bows down, pay obeisance to Buddha. Sarvadoshai vinirmuktam gunai sarvaihi alamkritam. So Buddha is called the Sarvajna, and free from all defects, all faults, and adorned with all imaginable auspicious qualities and virtues, is the only eternal friend of all beings. And then he says, Krodha durvarnada maurkhyam aprasnena vipaschidam phalam edat manishvyate sarvebhya prak cha durgatihi. It comes in the Ratnavali, first chapter itself. So it is a instruction to a king. So it's called a kind of hortatory or hortatory work, more of a exhortations, instructions, totally opposed to the structure of Vigraha Vyavartani, which has got very cold logic, very dialectical, very polemical. But here he says, if you get angry, that anger itself is ugly. Durvarnata. Murkhyam aprasnena vipaschida. And how do you become ignorant? You become ignorant because you don't discuss, you don't exchange ideas with people who are more learned than you. So Vurdhopasevida Vidya, you find in Mahabharata and many places you find. You can find many of these ideas that Nagarjuna brings out in Viduraniti, in the Mahabharata, in the words of Bhishma, in the words of Vidura. You find many of the great teachings of Nagarjuna. So when Nagarjuna is talking like a friend of a king, to make a king a wise man. And this wisdom, of course, emerges when the king realizes Shunyada. That's something very interesting. So you can find Nagarjuna's idea of Shunyada, the impact of realizing Shunyada is very similar to the impact of knowledge of Brahman in the context of Vedanta. So if you read Mahabharata, Viduraniti, there are many, also some ideas in the Vyasa Gita, the dialogue between a great teacher, is a Vyasa, is a butcher, a wise man, and a monk who proved that he has to learn a lot. So anyway, there's a different context. If you are interested, you can ask the question. I will explain later. So he says, Krodha Durvarnata. When you become angry, you become ugly looking. You make your own mind, your own your emotions and feelings, you disturb. And such a king can never practice justice. So when do you practice justice? When you realize Shunyata. Because when you realize Shunyata, what happens is, you realize that everything in this world is devoid of any inherent, eternal, permanent existence. And then you won't be, you won't develop a strong liking for somebody or a strong dislike for somebody. Our mind develops a unique kind of equilibrium, equanimity of mind, tranquility, justice and fair play, as we call in modern times. So, only a philosopher can be an ideal king, if we go by what Plato says in Republic. So, philosophy means keeping your mind in a state of balance, equanimity, harmony, evenness. Then only a king will be able to practice justice, then only he will become an ideal king. Phalametat manishyate sarvebhya praktu durgatihi. Phalametat manishyate sarvebhya praktu durgatihi. Now, these great results, fruits manifest in human life. But first, one may, if we don't realize this, you suffer. So, krodha is bad, because krodha will be like a seed that you sow, and the sprout will be suffering. According to the Praditya Samutpada doctrine, which can be analyzed in the light of the cyclic life, birth, life, death and rebirth. When this happens, every bad deed, bad experience, bad activity leads to some kind of suffering. So, krodha or anger for a king is the way to suffering. He loses his balance, he won't be able to do justice. So this Ratnavali establishes a close link, a strong link between Shunyavada and morality, moral conduct, emphasizing this kind of karmic consequences, karmic cycle. When we do something good, then we enjoy the good results. When we do something bad, it leads to suffering. So this emphasis on karmic consequences, we call it karma, vritti, samskara, vasana, sankalpa, chakram. Chakram means a wheel. When we do some action, it produces a residual effect which is called vritti. Continuous action of the same type will solidify, reinforce. This vritti becomes a samskara tendency. Again, it becomes an aptitude to do certain things in a certain manner. That leads to actions, and of course, prompted by desire. And actions again in their turn produce new vasanas and vrittis and samskaras. And this is the way of this continuing cycle of Praditya Samutpada, or the triple cycles, birth, life, death and rebirth. This continuation of this. So the point is, ethics or moral conduct and understanding of Praditya Samutpada, which in practical terms means understanding the truth of Shunyata, that everything in this world is conditioned, devoid of any kind of inherent independent existence. That realization will help a person to be an ideal king, and such a king will practice morality and ethics in his conduct as a king. So it's called, frequently it's called a kind of hortatory, or what you may call it, instructional, didactic, giving exhortations to a king. So this is the relevance of this Ratnavali. Morality, human destiny, and realization of Shunyata, and wisdom of a king to become an ideal ruler. All these are interrelated. It's a very marvelous book. When we wonder how a man like Nagarjuna, who wrote such a highly dialectical work like Vigrahavayavartini and Madhyamika Kariga, Mula Madhyama Shastra, how he wrote such a instructional book. But if you compare Shankaracharya, the author of the most dialectical, the most surprisingly profound philosophical classics in Sanskrit language, Indian philosophy, also was the author of the most moving devotional poetical classics in Sanskrit language. So there's a different thing. So the work is addressed to a king, and he uses many metaphors. And he also demonstrates how Shunyata can be applied in morality and ethics in the context of a ruler. Nagarjuna says that when you're establishing Shunyata, or the doctrine of emptiness, which actually means when you realize Shunyata, you are no more a prisoner of your own prejudices or your own likes and dislikes. Mind becomes pure, and again mind gets established in harmony, equanimity, and poise and justice. Because you know everything in this world, the kingdom, the comforts, the ministers, the courtiers, all the wealth and power associated with the kingship, all these belong to this realm of Shunya. Everything is conditioned, everything is devoid of any kind of inherent existence, inherent nature. So this realization will help a person to become an ideal king. So how to practice morality and ethics, duty in a proper manner with the help of this doctrine of Shunyata. This is a very, very, very important thing. So that's why he says, Dharmartha kama mokshanam yap pravartayati pathi sa raja sarvalokasya hidaya prabhavishyati. A king who follows the path, the way of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Interesting, Chadurvidha Purusha, the four fundamental values, all you find in Mahabharata. Practically in the entire Ratnavali, if you refer to the instructions from Bhishma in Bhishma Parva, Vidura Vakya, there are many such dialogues in the Mahabharata, many dialogues. How an ideal king should perform his duty. Even in the Ramayana, Rama's instructions to Lakshmana and Vasishtha's instructions to Rama during the early part of his life. That is, Praja Sukhe Sukham Raja. The happiness of a king is dependent upon the happiness of his subjects, citizens, his ruling. All these you find. And a king, a ruler, who doesn't provide for the four fundamental values of life, dharma, artha, kama and moksha, all the work and tools and means for enjoyment, but that effort, the pursuit of artha, desires, should not deviate from the path of dharma. And when we practice our normal life, the pursuit of artha and kama means to fulfill the desires, or to acquire the means and tools for fulfilling the desires. If we follow that path without deviating from the path of dharma, then one day we realize there is something higher than dharma, artha and kama, that is moksha, the higher transcendental value, called nirvana in Buddhism. So, of course, moksha in the popular Hindu tradition. So here Navali says, this is addressed to a king according to history called Shatavahana dynasty. That Shatavahana dynasty ruled over a part of India, not in extreme south, but somewhere middle, today's Maharashtra state, today's state of Andhra, many parts of Karnataka, and some parts of Orissa. They were included in the Shatavahana dynasty. So they were Hindu kings, but they were great patrons of Buddhist monasteries. So Nagarjuna incidentally came from a region that was within this, that was part of the Shatavahana dynasty. Sometime in the 3rd century, 2nd to 3rd, 4th century, around that time. So Nagarjuna, Amaravati was the capital for some time, which is now the government is trying to build a new capital with that name. We have reported bringing back ancient name Amaravati. That is a different matter, not in our context. So the point is, what he says is, he's addressing this king Shatavahana. Not the name of a king, but Shatavahana dynasty was a name of a dynasty. So which specific king he had in mind, we do not know. So it's a kind of blending of poetic advice with metaphors, linking realization of Shunyavada to ethical action, moral action. The dharmartha kama mokshanam yapravartayade pati. A king who follows the path of dharma, artha, kama and moksha, he will prosper. And the king will prosper, country will prosper for the welfare of the king and also the subjects. You can find similar ideas in the great poetical classic by Kalidasa called Raghuvamsha. It's actually a description of the dynasty to which Rama belonged, Sola dynasty. Raghu was an ancient king. So you can find that. These ideas are very common in the Mahabharata, in the works of Kalidasa, who incidentally may have lived maybe about 100 years before Nagarjuna, more or less the same time, but in a different part of the country. So that's a very important thing. So he says, so these are two different books. One is Vigraha and Ratnavali. They employed different or totally distinct different methodological approaches. But the purpose is to convey the importance of realizing Shunyavada. First, the Four Noble Truths, Sattvari, Arya, Satyani, then the Eightfold Disciplines, and finally, after Samyak Samadhi, you realize, you get Nirvana, and that is simultaneous with the realization of Shunyavada. The structure, rhetorical strategy, all very different from Vigraha Vyavartini and Mulamantima Shastra. Yadyasti bhavanam subhavassa na bhavadi nirbhavaha. Nirbhavo yadi vidyeda katham subhavo bhavishyati. This is actually from Vigraha Vyavartini. It's a contrast. So here he is dealing with this fundamental truth that everything in this world is devoid of subhava. Subhava means its own independent, inherent existence, its own independent, inherent nature. That's the meaning of subhava. So if all entities in the world had subhava, inherent nature, then they would not be produced. If production exists, how could inherent nature exist? The funny point is this. The cause and effect. Well, let's say, suppose you argue that a tree has its own sabhava, its own independent, inherent existence, the opposite of Shunyavada. Then that tree cannot produce a fruit, because something which has its own sabhava, it should be self-complete. It should be free from any changes. Because a fruit is a new development in a tree. A seed becomes a sprout becomes a tree. So the seed is becoming a sprout. That means the seed is devoid of any kind of inherent, independent, permanent existence. It has only conditioned existence. Conditioned because it's coming from a tree. The plant also is conditioned because it's coming from the seed. The tree also coming from the plant. The fruit coming from the tree. The seed again coming from the fruit. So everything is pratitya samutpada. There is of course origination, but dependent origination, not independent. If everything is dependent, then it has no sabhava. Sabhava should be something which never changes, we remain the same. It should not have come from something else, and nothing should come out of it. So that's why Nagarjuna says, Yadyasti bhavanam subhava sanna bhavati nirbhavaha nirbhavo yadi vidyeda katham subhavo bhavishyati. If things in this world had their own sabhava, inherent, independent existence, then they cannot be products of something else, like a fruit is a product of a tree. If there is production, then nothing can claim to have independent, inherent existence. Everything has got only dependent origination, dependent existence. That is pratitya samudbhava. So Nagarjuna negates Subhava. So this is an important thing. That's why Nagarjuna says, I don't have to prove anything. Prasanga, this reductio ad absurdum. He says, I don't have anything to prove. I have only to prove that whatever you call in this world, whatever you experience this, whatever you see in the world, it is coming from something else. So by itself, it doesn't have any independent, permanent, inherent existence. And so there is nothing for me to prove. I have only to disprove what you say. And when I say that whatever you are talking about is coming from something else, then beyond that I don't have to do anything. That is a prasanga method. That's why, according to scholars, it is Chandrakirti's prasanga method of interpreting Madhyamika Shastra, which has done full justice to Nagarjuna's original system of thoughts. But the greatness of Ratnavali, in contrast to Vigraha Vyavartani, is in Vigraha Vyavartani he is pure, cold-blooded logic, absolute, ruthless logic, no compromise. And sometimes if you read Nagarjuna's system and also Gaudapada's system, I used to give these classes earlier, like an old man sitting somewhere, cold face, no joy, no smile, but the old man is saying a great truth. So he doesn't have to smile, he doesn't have to prove anything. He has to tell you that what you said is wrong. He doesn't say that what I said is correct, because he has nothing to say. So very, very interesting. You find how Gaudapada, with great sense of loyalty and respect, followed Nagarjuna's method, but he said, that's true, instead of Shunya, he called it Brahman, that's all. He also said, Gaudapada also said, fundamentally Ajativada, non-origination of the universe. He says, actually the world has not come into existence. Suppose you say, the gold has not become an ornament. Why? If it really becomes an ornament, then if you melt it, you cannot make a ring out of it. That's the idea behind. The gold has not become an ornament. Only the gold has changed its shape and size and form. So we call it different name because it is a different form and different structure. That is Gaudapada. But then he says, therefore, there is only one reality and that one truth, that is Shunya. But Gaudapada called it Brahman or Atman. That's the only thing. And he says, there are statements that Atman is not a name of Atman. Atman is only a word that he used to call something which cannot be called by any name. And Nagarjuna comes very close to that. He says, all the Advaitic, all the technical language, expressions, vocabulary used by Nagarjuna and Gaudapada, many of them are almost identical. And all of them are similar, many of them are identical. So kind of narrative style that he employs. So, but then the same idea, the same apparently impractical, utopian idea. Somebody tells you everything in this world is devoid of any inherent existence. But that becomes a great philosophy for administration. It becomes a great ethical background for the very high concept of humanism. Ratnavali can be called a great work on spiritual humanism. Because when you realize the supreme spiritual truth, Shunya, you become a great ruler. It becomes impossible for you to do anything wrong. You can't punish a person for a wrong reason. You can't be cruel because why should you become cruel? If you think this world is devoid of inherent independent existence, in what for are you struggling? But then he says, that king who is working for the three dharma, artha, kama, moksha, the four purusharthas, fundamental values, very similar to Hinduism, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. So he says, a king who realizes the truth of Shunya can never practice adharma. And when he practices adharma, when he practices dharma, when he is fully established in dharma, then his pursuit of artha and kama, his pursuit of worldly achievements, worldly success will be always in accordance with the principles of dharma. And that will take him to the next fundamental transcendental value called moksha. Dharma, artha, kama and moksha. Nagarjuna repeats almost the words of Bhishma, Vidura and others in the Mahabharata. So that's why dharma, artha, kama, mokshanam ya pravartayade pati. A king is working hard for the fulfillment of the four fundamental values of all his subjects, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. And he totally avoids abstract logic. So now one thing is, I think this is a view of many modern thinkers. The Ratnavali, the great work Ratnavali, if you read it, then the wrong notion that Shunya is a kind of nihilism, kind of world-negating philosophy, that wrong notion will completely disappear. Unfortunately, what happens in modern times, we don't try to compare this. If you read because Shunyavada appears to be very profound, people are highly impressed because there's a lot of dialectics and polemical ideas in it. But at the same time, the same Nagarjuna realized that the actual application of Shunya experience is in the field of universal spiritual morality. You become fully established in a kind of spiritual morality, universal outlook, natural justice, when you get established in Shunya. So this Shunya has got a kind of transformative impact, kind of ethical imperative for any person. So that's why I just wanted to emphasize some of the teachings of Ratnavali, because without Ratnavali you won't get the complete picture of Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was a very cold dialectician and polemical writer, but same Nagarjuna had a great concern for life in this world, and this world is part of praditya samutpada, dependent origination. Everything in this world is devoid of any kind of inherent, permanent, independent existence. But still, in this world, one should practice morality and ethics. You should be very realistic. So that kind of realism. So Shunyavada is in a way not a kind of extreme idealism as frequently it is misunderstood. It also has an element of strong realism based on ethics and morality that we should practice while living in this world, which again is a part of the dependent origination. This fleeting, disappearing emptiness, but still we are living in this world. So this emotional connection and empathy. Stories all, if we find him telling stories which engage emotions and foster empathy. So abstract ideas like emptiness have a personal application in one's life. It makes a person calm and quiet, fully established in justice. There is a lot of storytelling and reflection, and in many ways it has got a universal relevance. And also there are not too many details, certain stories are mentioned. Then it's a kind of minimalism you find in the storytelling method, a kind of minimalism. So the listener should fill the gap. But the effect of reading Ratnavali with deep concentration is that one gets fully established in a sense of justice and humanism, which is not part of ethical morality as understood in law or in national justice, but it is an expression of one's spiritual experience of emptiness. So the spiritual impact of realization of emptiness is that you become a wonderful, good human being. Of course, it's addressed to the King Shatavahana, but it is meant for the entire universe. So you find that's why he doesn't go into many details, with fewer explicit details. And the stories are minimalist in the style of conversation. There's a lot of subtext and all that. Anyway, so a kind of universal morality, that was his goal in writing this Ratnavali. After this, we will have a short discussion. You can discuss in a general way, you can discuss. And in the next class onwards, we will start discussion of the second school of idealism in the Mahayana system. It's called Yogachara or Vijnanavada. It's called Yogachara because some of the great Buddhists were practitioners of yoga system. Mindfulness is really part of these eightfold disciplines. And in the Yogachara system, they give a lot of importance to it. Sadhyupattana Sutta, Mahasadhyupattana Sutta. One is a bigger one. Mahasadhyupattana Sutta is a Buddha's discourse given to a larger audience, which included monks and also householders. Sadhyupattana is a shorter one, which actually was addressed to an audience of monks only. And now we can have a discussion, and after that we conclude today. We can have a class on Yogacara system. It's called Vijnanavada, another name, because they believe in Vijnana. Two levels of evolution you find, Alaya Vijnana, Pravritti Vijnana. We'll discuss when you take up the Yogacara system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you.
First question is from Sri Ram. Please go ahead.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Another term for Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma, which is
Yeah.
eternal Dharma.
Yeah.
So by the Shunyavada definition, Buddha Dharma can be defined as Ashashvata Dharma, and it is natural to infer completeness, Purnam, from Sanatana Dharma, whereas nihilism is a more natural interpretation of Shunyavada. How do you argue, what is the intuition for how we can infer morality and such things from Shunyavada Swamiji? I couldn't follow it.
Oh, yeah, sure. See, well, you know how Nagarjuna links the realization of Shunyata to morality and ideal conduct for a ideal king. Now, when you realize that there is nothing in this world which is permanent, nothing in this world which has got independent, inherent existence or nature, then you'll be free from greed. Because most of our wrong actions, greed, selfishness, cruelty, Shadurmi called Kama, Krodha, Madamatsarya, all these, are somehow linked to the belief or the desire to acquire something. Desire. It is the desire that actually prompts clinging to life, actions, and then samskaras, again which lead to the continuation of life, rebirth. Again you continue your actions. Again you accumulate vrittis, vasanas and samskaras because of your desire and karma, and that again this make you cling more and more faster to this desire, and this leads to this cyclic rotation, the endless cycle of birth, life, death and rebirth, which is called samsara, which is actually dukkha.
Can you interrupt for a second? When we do adhyasa on material, when we think material is eternal, when we do adhyasa, that's what leads to greed.
Adhyasa.
Correct.
Okay, I discussed Advaita Vedanta in almost 43 classes, much more elaborately than Buddhism. So I discussed this point, So remember, when you study Buddhism, you cannot compare some of the details of Buddhism with the details of Vedanta. You can have a comparison, you can see some kind of parallelisms only at the level of conclusions, not minor details. If you say, for example, your Advaitins say you should practice sadhana yudhishthaya sampatti, but Buddha says you have to practice eightfold disciplines. You cannot have a comparison at the level of details, minor points. You can have a comparison only at some of the central teachings and doctrines of different systems of philosophy. So comparative study is logical only at the level of conclusions and not at the level of minor details. So adhyasa will not help you, in fact. Actually, see, we are discussing this important book of Ratnavali. Let us focus on that, what I mentioned earlier. Suddenly, if you bring something from Advaita Vedanta and compare like that, I've discussed Ramanuja, Vallabha, Nimbarka, Chaitanya, Shankara, and so on. So many I discussed. You can bring all these together. There will be no end to that. So when you want to compare, it's always better to compare some of the foundational, fundamental doctrines or the conclusions of one system with the conclusions of other system, not minor details. To be very frank with you, when you realize Shunyata, your mind will be experiencing the same level of balance, harmony, tranquility that is associated with the realization of Brahman. A Jivan Mukta also remains in perfect harmony, totally undisturbed, unperturbed. And he will never do anything wrong because he understands everything this world is vyavakarika. Like pratiti samutpada. Everything this world is only a changing phenomena, vyavakarika. So why should you worry about anything? You naturally established in ethics and morality. Similarly, Nagarjuna says, now when you are fully established in the realization of shunyata, which means everything in this world is dependent, not independent. Everything is conditioned by something. It doesn't have its own sabhava, its own independent, inherent nature. It is dependent. So why should you work hard for money? Why you become greedy? It means you desire. But that money will go away when it's a part of Shunya. Advaitins will say it is vyavakarika. It's a fleeting phenomenon. Nagarjuna will say it is only Shunyata. So the same effect. Your emotions and feelings will come down. We become balanced, calm and quiet. Okay? So this is what really happens.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. And another, I will extend this further. Also, when you become a devotee, suppose you don't worry about Nagarjuna or Shankara or Ramanuja or anyone. When you become a humble devotee of God, believe in some higher ideals, you feel the same inner calmness and quietude and tranquility and peace and compassion, empathy with everyone. On the other hand, the more you pray to God, the more cruel you become, the more monstrous you become, the more greedy you become, the more violent you become. That's not Naga, that's not spirituality, that's not religion. So Nagarjuna says, when you become established Shunyata, you become calm and quiet and tranquil, established in harmony. Such a king will be naturally established in justice. He can never do anything that is opposite to justice. So that's the book is such a wonderful book. It is maybe one of the finest books on kind of spiritual humanism. I remember it's written by a person who did not go to a temple every day, who was an agnostic, who denied the existence of a creator God. And he's writing this great book on humanism. Just imagine the wonder of it. So you don't have to be a conventional believer in God to be a good human being. It's enough to understand Shunyata. What is Shunyata? Very simple. I need all these things, but everything, after all, you want it disappear. Nothing has got any kind of inherent, permanent, independent existence. So it doesn't mean that you should run away from the world. But you will be able to restrain yourself when there's an impulse to do something wrong out of greed. You'll be able to restrain yourself. That's a wisdom that Nagarjuna is putting in the head of this King Shatavahana. Okay, thank you for the question. Wonderful question. Thank you. Very important question. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. Shay, you're next.
Yeah.
Namaskar.
Namaste. Yeah, namaste. Yeah.
My question is about Mandukya Karika and Nagarjuna's philosophy.
Yeah.
Specifically, there's this section in the third part of the Karika where Gaudapada makes this distinction between a focused mind and the mind in deep sleep, between samadhi and sushupti.
Yeah.
And one thing you mentioned in your lecture that's recorded from back then is that it's a response to Nagarjuna's philosophy that in deep sleep you no longer experience duality, and in samadhi you no longer experience duality. So what is the distinction there?
Yeah. Okay, so can I explain that? In Sushupti, it's called deep sleep, dreamless sleep. What happens? Your mind doesn't function. Your mind merges in Mula Vidya according to Vedantic traditions. So your ability to see anything, to experience anything, goes away, disappears. It's because the tools for connecting with external objects are not functioning. Your eyes, your ears are not functioning. In samadhi, you go beyond it. Your tools of perception, experiencing different things, they are not benumbed as in sushupti or deep sleep, but they are transcended, going beyond. There's a great difference between going beyond and absence of it. See, you are not able to, your mind loses its ability. Your mind is not at all functioning in sushupti, in deep sleep. But at the same time, mind is there, but not functioning. How do you know the mind is there? Because when you get out of sleep, you come out of sleep, you had a feeling, I had a wonderful sleep. Now you cannot have that feeling unless your mind was present. But mind was not functioning, but mind was present. Actually, if you don't get deep sleep, your brain will be very much disturbed. You won't get complete sleep in dream or waking state or half sleep. Deep sleep is important and essential for you to get complete sleep. But that restfulness happens because your mind is not functioning. It just becomes totally non-functional. But in samadhi, you transcend, you go beyond the mind. Mind is transcended. You go far beyond the mind. So, in samadhi, nothing but sushupti with enlightenment. Or sushupti is nothing but samadhi without enlightenment. In sushupti, you are helpless. You can't do anything. You are not within your control. But in samadhi, it is a kind of experience with total awareness. Sushupti, there is no awareness. In samadhi, there is complete awareness. In sushupti, mind is there, but when you are in sushupti, mind is not functioning. How do you know, as I mentioned, mind is there? When you come out of sushupti, you feel, I had a wonderful sleep. That feeling will not be possible unless mind was present. The mind was not aware of its own existence in sushupti. Samadhi, everything is there, but you go far beyond. That's all.
Now, why would Nagarjuna make this, how does this relate to Nagarjuna's philosophy? Would he view Sushupti as a tool to understand Shunyata, or what is the connection there?
So that's why we should study Ratnavali. People don't study Ratnavali. And they think Nagarjuna was a cold-blooded logician, dialectician. See, if you read only Vigraha Vyavartani and Mula Madhyama Shastra, Madhyamikarika, you think Nagarjuna had no heart. He was like a machine, like a robot. He's saying, what does it matter if it is everything Shunya, all right Shunya, then what does it mean? How does it affect me? That answer comes only when you read Ratnavali. So the close link, the inseparable link between Shunyata and actual life is application in life. So Shunyata becomes the foundation for the highest ethical, moral philosophy in Ratnavali. Without this book, perhaps, Nagarjuna would have been taken just a cold-blooded cold dialectician. So because when you become established in Shunyada, you become a very good human being. All competition, all greed, all desire, all you go beyond. Remember, modern times are different. Even if you don't have any desire, people do terrible things. But Nagarjuna lived in happier times, unfortunately. Modern age has produced certain special features, psychological characteristics, which require a different interpretation, because in modern times people can do terrible things fully knowing that by doing those things they will be doing harm to themselves. Still they will do terrible things, as I mentioned earlier. But Nagarjuna's philosophy is simple. It's also Plato. Plato is also kind of wisdom that the Plato is talking about. That balanced philosopher's attitude. It's more we learned this world. There is an otherworldly aspect about Shunyavada, something transcendental. That's why in Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedanta, all these systems, something is projected beyond this world. It may be, except in Indian materialism, Dvatsayana and others, in the materialism, called Charvaka system. Lokayatika as they call. But even in Buddhism and Jainism, which incidentally do not affirm a creator God, there is a profound humanism. You realize Shunyada, then you don't sit there quiet, oh, everything is Shunya, I have nothing to do. Everything is Shunya, so I should become a better human being. The realization of Shunyada makes a person a better human being. Just like Vedantic realization makes you a better human being. But this idea becomes obvious and well pronounced in Ratnavali, not in the Vigraha Vyavartani and other books. Okay?
Shani, I think before we get to David, there might be time for you to drill further into this question that you have about the linkage between deep sleep and Nagarjuna's Sunya, because I'm not sure that was fully explored. So
okay, I will explain further. Now this is called avasthatraya. I mean 3 states of awareness, consciousness: waking, dream, and deep sleep or dreamless sleep. So what happens is, when we in the waking level, waking experience, we gather all memories, experiences, and then we have dreams. Dream experience can never be completely detached or separate from waking state experiences, but cannot be a duplication, cannot be repetition. So whatever we have done in the waking state level, we have made preparations for the dream objects, dream experience. In deep sleep, what happens is, our awareness is gone, mind is transcended, external organs of perception and organs of action are not functioning, but still we are merged with a supreme reality without awareness. That's why in Vedanta there is a great controversy, debate. There are some schools of philosophy, minor schools of philosophy which argue that Sushupti and Samadhi, deep sleep and Samadhi are the same. Shankaracharya draws a very clear line of demarcation between the two. So in the Chandogya Upanishad, Vyakrova, Simkhova, Mardo, you find even animals also get deep sleep. You can, if you look at your dog in your home, pet dog, sometimes they feel they show disturbance, they are dreaming. So if that disturbance is similar to the disturbance the dog may feel when you show him the picture of a lion, the same thing. Now, in dreams, you can find dogs or animals show symptoms of disturbance because they may have nightmares. We do not know. Veterinary doctors, there are different views. They say they don't have mind, but they have instinct memories which function as uncontrolled instinct, not deliberate, not instinct with awareness, but instinct without awareness. But in deep sleep, all these are gone. So when we are not experiencing anything called Dvaita, when you are not experiencing anything other than you, as happens in deep sleep, you feel complete restfulness. I hope you understand it. In waking state, we are here, there is a car, there are other human beings, two, subject and object. In dreams also, in dreams, our mind projects so many experiences. In mind also, with you can find you are going from here to New York in one split second in dream. There also you are traveling. You see an elephant, you see a car in dream. So subject-object distinction is there. In deep sleep, the subject-object distinction is transcended. Everything is merged into called Mula Vidya, the original ignorance that the all-pervading, you may call Maya with anything. You are not aware of anything. You are enjoying sleep, but you are not aware of the fact you are enjoying sleep. But that awareness returns to you when you wake up. I had a good sleep. That's why people want to get deep sleep. Otherwise, unless this joy or bliss associated with total absence of duality, that's what actually gives you this blissful feeling. In Samadhi or Turiya, this total absence of duality is experienced with full awareness. In deep sleep, without awareness. In Samadhi or in Turiya, with full awareness. When you have this full awareness, you get a kind of transcendental knowledge, a higher spiritual experience. But when awareness is not there, this doesn't happen. Follow the point? So, the bliss that you feel in deep sleep, the bliss that you feel in Samadhi, there is a kind of external similarity, but they are totally different. That's the idea. That's why Chandogya tells you that animals also get deep sleep, but they remain animals. But if you get Samadhi, you are no more this present person. You become a different person. You develop a higher awareness, and that never leaves you. You transcend it. You may live as a normal man in this world, but there will be something within you that reminds you of your true nature. Okay, it's clear. Bobby, any more thing?
Maharaj, you may have already answered this, but I thought Shay's question was that experience similar to Sunya?
Exactly. That is true. That's what I was implying. The same as Shunya. But Shunya, when you experience Shunya, you get nirvana and it brings a kind of bliss. That is very much made clear in Buddhist tradition. When you did the Shunya and nirvana, the same, remember, and I am using the same language. For Madhyamika system, nirvana is Shunya experience. But not for, remember, not for Yogacharya, Sautrantika and Vaibhashika. There are two schools of realism, Hinaya tradition. For Nagarjuna, Shunyada experience is nirvana. And when you get nirvana, you get this freedom, you feel the freedom from pratitya samutpada, dependent origination, that higher experience. That is the same bliss.
Maharaj, we're comparing, but we're also aware of not conflating and not expecting parallelism.
Not exactly. See, there is total identity with regard to experience, but absolutely not identity at the philosophical terminology level. That's the point. At the philosophical terminology level, there will be no identity, no total non-difference is possible. Well, you can always see that in any tradition, any spiritual tradition, a person who has got all the qualities, Shama, Dhamma, Uparaditi, Diksha, Saddha, Samadhana, all these are qualities that come to an Advaita, really speaking, Sadhana, Yadhushta, Sambhati. Or what you call the samyak walk, all that, the right speech, right thought, right memory, right, is the eightfold disciplines of Buddhism. Now, when you practice all these, you are climbing to a higher level of awareness as to who you are and the nature of the world around you. Whether you are practicing as a sincere Christian, reading Bible, believe in your own tradition or any Buddhist, any faith, but if you are doing it with a pure, sincere mind, you feel the same bliss. But I have some observations with regard to certain traditions where they don't have a role model like Christ. This is very important. Very often people can do terrible things in the name of God and religion. But when religion is defined as a kind of spiritual humanism, as Nagarjuna does Shunya or Advaita, then you find you've kind of identical feeling of inner bliss, and you become a blessing to everyone around you, and you also cannot do any harm to an insect, to anyone around you. So the total, complete bliss and contentment within, and also you become a blessing to everyone around you. Not a threat, but a bliss for everyone around you. That kind of universal humanism. You become a good human being. That is a sense of spirituality. That is common whether you practice, experience Shunyavada or anything else. That's the point. You can check anyone for the matter. So, you cannot imagine a Buddha doing something terrible to the world or to anyone, or a Christ as we understand him historically, or any of these great men. You can Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Shankaracharya, you can't imagine. Because what they taught, what is being taught in their name, are designed to make you basically a good human being. That good human being, you can underline that. Remember, the greatness of Nagarjuna is he teaching only and did not believe in God, did not go to a temple. Remember that very well. You have to understand the force of that argument. Nagarjuna was not a believer in God, but he is teaching this great, wonderful spiritual humanism, Shunyavada. And he is teaching to a king, who was, Satavahana was a Hindu king, not a Buddhist. So he promoted Buddhism. He promoted Buddhist monasteries in his kingdom, Satavahana kingdom. So that is Nagarjuna's humanism. Just think of that.
Maharaj, that actually just answered the question I had about the king and that dynasty. They were Hindus, not Buddhists, but they were big supporters of Buddhism. Was that in response to Ratnavali, or was that already going on?
I think in those days it was a tradition. Many of in the Guptas of Ujjain, they were Hindus, Vikramaditya, Samudragupta and others. Harshavardhana was a great Hindu king emperor. So they were all great patrons of Buddhism. They patronized Buddhist monasteries. So I think the idea of intolerance was unheard of during those days. The idea of intolerance, the idea that your religion is wrong or your path is wrong. You see, I tell you, the place I'm coming, South India also, many of the temples which are well known today used to be Buddhist monasteries. When Buddhists again came back to Hinduism under the influence of Shankaracharya. And naturally, all the Sanskrit Pandits, Brahmins flocked to Buddhism, like Nagarjuna, Dignaga, Vasubandhu, Chandrakirti, Asanga, all this. Then what happened after Shankaracharya's time? They came back to Hinduism. So remember that. So many of the temples they became Buddhist temples. Many of them later came back to the Hindu temples. If we go to Cambodia, for example, Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is a Vishnu temple, the biggest temple in the world. Vishnu temple. But today if you go, you find a Vishnu structure is changed into Buddha. If you go there, you find. You can see that. No more, it was not used by Buddhists because maybe during the troubles of 1970s and 80s, something happened, they said Cambodia. So, all those huge temples, some of them were Hindu temples and they became Buddhist temples later. The deity, looks the deity of Vishnu, and you can find Buddhas again. But nobody bothers, all right, fine. Yeah.
I have to remark that in recent centuries in the West, the philosophers have had their hands full of petitioning ruling monarchs just to try to rein them in a little bit, to be more humanistic and not out of control. But back in these times, it seems as though the philosophers were actually petitioned by the kings and had a dialogue to elevate.
Yeah. Nagarjuna, There are many dialogues in Buddhist tradition. See, Buddhism became part of Indian culture, went so deep into it. So, that's a very interesting story. The golden era of great kings who sought the help, advice of great philosophers, Buddhist philosophers. A man like Nagarjuna. That's why Ratnavali is a very important book for understanding the actual relevance of Shunyavada, because Shunyavada applied in life becomes a great humanistic ideal.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah,
I want to thank Shay for the question and the follow-up. And
thank you, Shay.
David has been very patient. And, I appreciate it. David, it's your turn now.
Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
My question is not exactly related to the talk today.
Yeah.
I was just if reading the Panchadasi and how Ishwara knows the past, the present, and the future, is omniscient of all time in as in an eternal sense. Does that mean that if Ishwara knows the past, the present, and the future of all beings, does that mean that all our actions, all our thoughts are predetermined, predestined for Ishwara to be able to know that?
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that, and what.
Yeah.
The question of predestination.
Yeah. Actually, if you believe in predeterminism and if you believe that God has created this world and designed this world, everything is happening according to His will, then you don't have a very high opinion of a God who creates a terrible world, Either He's a good man but incapable of creating a better world, or a cruel man and who deliberately created this terrible world. So the problem in Vedantic tradition is you don't begin your inquiry with the cause. God created this world and so it happened. Rather, you are trying to find an explanation for this world in which we are living, from effect to cause. So, and then, according to Vedanta, Vedanta tells you that this world as such is not permanent. It is not the best place. Living in this world is not the highest thing not the most blissful experience that we can aspire for. There are better options. And how do we go for these better options? Is there a way we can stop being born in this world? Is there a way we can stop experiencing this birth, life and death, and again rebirth, this continuous cycle? The question arises because we don't begin our inquiry with the cause, God sitting and creating this world. Rather, we begin our inquiry with the effect, this world and our own life. We look around, how did this world come into existence? You find out. Then finally you realize, well, there's no point in doing that because everything in this world is changing. Everything is subject to changes. You are happy today, you are unhappy tomorrow, day after tomorrow again you are happy. This happens in cosmic cycles. So, this takes you to the highest philosophy. That's why, belief in God is not as important in Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta, as in other non-Vedantic systems of Hindu philosophy or in Abrahamic religions. It's a very important point. So, this trend of turning inquiry, making more profound inquiry, can be found in the great German theology and Dominican theology called Meister Eckhart, where he tried to find the original source that goes beyond the three names, Father, Son and Holy Ghost, beyond Trinity. But for certain reasons, it didn't go very far, and they don't discuss very much, and we don't find much discussion going on. So the point is, in Hinduism and Vedanta, and also in Buddhism also, Buddha is looking around. Well, and he found that one day when he was taken along in a chariot in the city, he found a dead body being taken to cremation ground, a sick man, an old man. So death, sickness and old age. Terrible things. See the way out? And then he saw a monk, serene face, no problem, nothing. Calm and quiet. So he wanted to find an answer. So he begins his inquiry with what he saw around him. And he wanted to find a reason for it. And he went and meditated. This story goes. Dhrida Vistara, Buddha Ji and others. Ihasane, Shushurime, Sariram, etc. I mentioned this in times. And then finally he thought he found an answer. The answer is this. According to Nagarjuna, everything in this world is Shunya. Then why worry? No, he remember, this exposition may not be an answer to the question, why should create this cruel world? That's why I fully understand, I am aware of that problem. So, why should a God create this cruel world? That question can never have an answer. No. Because, can you, historically, if you are a student of history, world history, Christ's times were not better than our times. We have COVID-19, but Christ's times, just imagine Roman Empire, Augustus Caesar, Octavius Caesar, all of them were, even, let me say, maybe around 30 years after his crucifixion, Roman, the 10th Legion destroyed that battle in the fort, the last stand of the Jewish people, The car, there is a car, that is a car company, that's the name of that great, the fall of the...
you're thinking of Masada.
Masada, exactly. The last stand of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. See that is 70, 71, 80. So, and then, so you can imagine, at that time, then before that, Assyrians and others, very bloodthirsty civilizations. And again, Roman Empire continued, and you can then, so many terrible things were happening all the time in this world. So if you look at world history, there's never a time the world was any time better than our own times. The only difference perhaps is this nuclear proliferation and the possibility of total extinction of humanity and life. That means there's a new trend, a new development in the later half of 20th century. Apart from that, the world was always in a turmoil somewhere. And even the great teacher like Buddha, according to historian, Buddha died of died of pork meat which is poisoned, not deliberately, by mistake. It is shot, the animal was shot with poisoned arrow. It was properly cooked, and he died of that. But he was calm and quiet. So you are right. The world was never a better place than what it is right now. Proportionately speaking, problems come and go, they change the nature, but everything is the same. It doesn't mean that we should stop looking for a better future, not at all. But when we are in a total despair, what to do, then we should look back and find this is a story of human civilization. But then you find the Buddha or Nagarjuna, all these great men, they are here, and from time to time many of them came and they spoke differently, they lived differently, they had something to offer to humanity. Not that they promised there will be no problem for you in future. That never really realizes, That never really happened. Still, there were always small, tiny groups who thought differently, lived differently, who were a source of inspiration and optimism for human civilization. Every country has produced such great men and such great women. That's all we can say. Okay.
I think you can say, though, that suffering has increased because there are more people now.
Yeah,
So,
true.
well,
Yeah.
That sense,
Close to 8 billion people. And then the additional problem of nuclear proliferation, and then the danger of the possibility of the risk of total extinction is a new trend. There's a contribution of, I think, 20th century, really speaking, which continues on 21st century. But apart from that, the world was always in some kind of a turmoil somewhere here and there. There was no real. Only great human beings had made progress in spiritual life, not civilizations or nations. No. Great human beings. They were great men and great women who thought differently, who looked at the world differently, who had something better to offer. And their contribution to the totality of human civilization. And if you read Nagarjuna's, this called the Ratnavali, you can see that the stature of this great cold dialectician becomes a great humanist, teaching a king how to rule properly, like with humility, with spiritual wisdom, coming out of the realization of Shunyavada. That's why Ratnavali is important, because that will tell you that Shunyavada is not nihilism. It is not nothingness as we understand by the English word. It is something totally different. It's kind of spiritual enlightenment, an experience of spiritual enlightenment that makes you a better human being. In this context, Ratnavali makes the king, the Satavahana, a better king. Yeah.
Maharaj,
Thank you.
Maharaj, one curiosity I have is that when we look at the soul, when we look at the soul collectively, the degree of suffering hasn't really increased if we consider it collectively, and the character is exactly the same. And I think Swami Vivekanandaji has so much to say about freedom and human agency and free will in terms of action. And so, reading the works of Vivekananda, there's so much in there that inspires us to act with that freedom, as opposed to our worship somehow cowing us into a lack of agency.
Yeah. No, that's true. In fact, this Ratnavali is a good example. Nagarjuna wanted the king to be proactive for a good purpose, but realizing emptiness, that makes you proactive at a higher level than otherwise. That's very interesting. See, creative, constructive spirituality, dynamic spirituality. So that's why Ratnavali is important. Otherwise, if you study Shunyavada, everything is nothingness, everything is emptiness, you don't see it has any relevance to our daily life as such, not much.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you,
David, and all the questioners.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the questions, and thank you, Gopinathji. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we will continue next week, but we'll take up a different system of Buddhism that is also from Mahayana system. It's called Yogachara Vijnanavada. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Yeah. Namaste.